everyone. Today is Wednesday, May 14th. It is now 6 p.m., well, 6:01, and I'm calling this budget meeting to order. All right. I think I would like to move forward with our land acknowledgement. And I think originally Director Guzman-Ortiz was going to read our land acknowledgement. I'm not sure if she's online. She's online?
I am here.
Can you still read our land acknowledgement?
I had it up. Okay, yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I will be in person as soon as I can, but we are gathered today on the land of the Kalapuya, who are represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. The relationship between the Kalapuya people and this land continues unbroken to this day, and we offer gratitude for the land and for the generations present and past who have stewarded the land since time immemorial. We respectfully acknowledge and honor past, present, and future Native American and Indigenous students and staff of Salem-Keizer Public Schools. We invite you to join us in honoring these ancestral grounds and celebrating the resilience and strength of all Native American and Indigenous people.
Thank you very much. And now I'll ask Cynthia Richardson to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right, and now I'm going to read each committee member's name aloud for roll call. And we'll start with William Guthridge.
Here.
Jean Jatan.
Here.
Catherine Jones.
Here.
Jessica Peterson.
Here.
Oscar Porras.
Here.
Patrick Schwab.
Here.
Kelly Strawn.
Here.
Cynthia Richardson.
Here.
Karina Guzman-Ortiz.
Here.
Lisa Harnish.
Here.
Ashley Carson Cottingham. Here. Satya Chandagiri.
I'm here, please.
Maria Hinojos Presi is here, and Chrissy Hudson. Wonderful. So we have the entire committee present, and that moves us right into our review of the proposed budget and response on committee questions. So last week, the superintendent delivered the budget address and introduced us to the budget. Today's session will be dedicated to a little presentation, but also to discussion, questions, and answers. So here's how we're going to do this. The superintendent and her team will offer brief presentation and information related to the questions submitted at our last meeting. Then the committee will hear public comment related to the budget. We'll conclude with time for discussion and additional questions. Many of your questions are likely ones that the team can answer during the meeting. If there are questions that are more significant or require research, we will take a vote on the request. The vote helps determine if there is sufficient committee interest and urgency for the research to be conducted. I'll call for a vote on requests that fall into this category, and a majority vote, which is 8 of our 14-member committee, is required to approve the question for staff responses. If over the course of this meeting, any member of the committee wishes to request a change to the proposed budget, I ask that you share that request today. We will not call for motions or take votes on requested changes, but we will take note of them and handle those requests on Monday, May 19th. And with that, I will turn this portion of the agenda over to Superintendent Castañeda.
Thank you, Chair and Budget Committee. We are looking forward to our conversation tonight. We have information to share, but most importantly, discussion to have together. But before we do that, I am both sad and delighted to pause briefly and honor, praise, express profound gratitude to Sarah, who's not even stopping talking or typing long enough to know that this is happening. So for almost 10 years, I think it is, Sarah has just brought tremendous skill and care and diligence and expertise to the financial health of the system, but more than that, also just the wellness of the people in the system. I've only been with her for 2 years, but I've seen how much she cares about her team. She cares about the children of this district, the health of the system, and the way that we serve. And I don't know if it is perfectly suitable or just sadly mismatched to honor you in a budget committee meeting, but here we are, doing it nonetheless. It has been a really exceptional 2 years that I've been able to spend with you. I've learned so much from you. You've kept us on point and helped us see the future in ways that make something like tonight possible, because this is not the conversation that every district is having. This is the conversation that you helped us get to. And so we just want to say thank you and to tell you how much you mean to us.
News, but I am here tonight and I am ready for your hard questions. All right?
Okay, so with that, we will jump in. So this first portion, we're going to really just burn through a significant number of answers to the questions that were asked. Then we will go to public comment, and then afterwards there'll be time for you to come back and say, you know, I still have questions about these matters. We're going to be fielding all together. I will kick it off on page 1 of the document that we sent you. You should all have hard copies in front of you. For anyone who's watching, I believe it is posted, so you can access the answers there. The first portion is not an answer to a question, it is an update. So while we were presenting the budget to you, we were also presenting a counter offer at the bargaining table to our licensed association. And that means that there's about a $3 million shift in our expense line related to personnel, because we increased our offer for a COLA and our insurance offer. So you'll see that $3 million is an increase in personnel expenses, budgeted personnel expenses, and that means it's a projected decrease of $3 million in our projected ending fund balance. The other thing that we want you to know is that today was revenue forecast day. So for those of you who do not live and die by the state budget, you might not know that happened. But it was what's the right word? I can say it was a disappointing revenue forecast. They are projecting a potential of an $800 million decrease from March in state revenue for the biennium. And that means that our chances for additional state funding beyond what we have already budgeted for are increasingly dim. We budgeted for only the governor's recommended budget. We did not anticipate any of the other additions that might come through. At this point, all advocacy is focused on maintaining the governor's recommended budget. We remain hopeful for that. But even the revenue forecast news today does not change the underlying assumptions upon which this budget's built. Finally, I need to correct 2 small errors. The first is I misspoke, or as my husband would say, I misunderstood, I misspoke, and then I clean it up. So I said that 15% of our elementary school classes were over 30. That was incorrect. It's 7%. So my apologies for that. It is actually 45 of 615 classrooms. And then second, there was a very small formula error in your packet. The one you were emailed, it has been corrected in your hard copy, and it has been noted for you. It doesn't actually change the underlying data story. It is the one related to back office services. Okay, so with that, I am going to go on to question number 1, which is from Director Chandragiri, related to the work we do in parent engagement. You'll see a summary here. It isn't a complete inventory of everything, but it gives you a sense of the district staffing and other forms of investment in parent engagement. You'll also see here some of the detail that demonstrates the degree to which our CSOCs and our CRSs That's the 18 FTE and the 38.4 are central to our parent engagement efforts. The second question was from committee member Jitan about contingency and ending fund balance, and I'm going to turn that one over to Sarah.
Okay, how's that? For contingency, I think the question that you asked was, is it available for the current year that we're working on the budget for, 26, or is it for 27? And the way we have appropriated it according to the ODEP BAM, Program Budgeting and Accounting Manual, would allow use of it through a supplemental budget in 26, and then hopefully there would be plenty left for 27 also.
The third question was asked by committee member Jones. It's about back office. We did go through a couple rounds of email-based clarification just to make sure we really were on point about the nature of the request. So there's a couple of things I want to walk you through here. You can see the actual, what are actually the function codes for what we're calling back office services. You can see that our total of back office staffing services are 2% of our personnel budget. I think that no matter how we slice this, we're coming in at somewhere between 1.1 and 2%. And it is because I continue to believe we run as lean as we know how to run. And those numbers are, I think, easily and well within the range of any organization providing back office services. The detailed page with the very small font shows you what that looks like by total investment. It also shows you what it looks like by area. And so there you can see our FTE and our total investment for everything that we agreed upon to run as a back office expense category. And then the following page shows you a comparison to the only two districts that are comparable in size. Beaverton is very difficult for us to do because they do not use full-time equivalent as a staffing measure. They use a Beaverton specialty called an APU that is not comparable. I think it'll be a relief to probably them and us when they're using an FTE as well as a standard measure. So what that leaves us with is Portland, and you can see the total staffing and back office functions there, Portland compared to Salem-Keizer. We also are showing it to you as a percentage of, as a function of enrollment so that you can see it adjusted for size. No matter how you look at that number, we are running far, far leaner than Portland. Having said that, I believe we are running about the same size as Beaverton. Even without being able to do direct comparison, it's very close. The full picture here that we hope we offer is the clarity you needed to understand the work that we do, the complexity and breadth at which we do it, and the comparatively small percentage of our total staff we dedicate to that work. Question number 4 is going to go to Jonathan.
Good evening. For question number 4, Member Strawn's question around the financial impact for staff attrition. We pulled some numbers that we had internally. So over the last 2 years, on average, we had about a 250 licensed staff leave and about 400 classified staff. Below that, you'll see some of the research around just general trends across the nation and an estimator that tries to, as best as we can, find the cost for attrition. While we don't have internal numbers, we've relied on some of those national aggregate studies and trends to get approximately $20,000 as the cost per licensed teacher attrition in terms of replacing and finding a new teacher. That typically includes things like research or recruitment and hiring, training, the separation cost, district costs, and school level costs. Of course, that does not include some very significant components like how that impacts students and the productivity and the academic achievement. But from a pure cost perspective alone, if we take that 250 staff members for licensed times 20,000, which is on the lower estimate, usually they range around a third of the total salary, you can see sort of that $5 million unfold as an annual cost for attrition. Classified, there's less research on that, especially given the wide number of roles that looks like across the systems nationally. But if we just took a roughly similar percentage of their salary at 10,000, multiply that out and you get about 4 million. In net, that sort of attrition cost the district incurs that's not a budget item, but is something that we have to understand and experience when we're thinking about training, hiring, recruitment, et cetera, is about $9 million per year.
I'll address questions 5 and 6. 5 is around dyslexia services, and you have lots of information there, but I'll summarize. We do screening for dyslexia in kinder and first grade, and students participate in this screening as part of their reading trajectory. We want to make sure that we're catching kids pretty early on, and then we continue monitoring their progress through the MTSS systems in schools. And if a student is identified for risk factors, then they participate in interventions that last 8 or 10 weeks, and then teachers review those interventions to continue moving them through their trajectory. If a student hasn't made progress in 2 or 3 rounds of those 8 to 10 week interventions, then a team in the school can consider, of course, we communicate with the parent and we tell them they're participating in these interventions, here's how we're addressing that need and how we're building on that skill. But if they're not making progress, then we do testing for special education, and then we usually qualify a student under a specific learning disability, and they start getting additional resources and supports for reading. These can continue, all the way through their years in our schools, but usually if we are doing the general education, so the student that gets the special education continues to have general education services with all of those interventions that happen at the classroom level with their general education teacher. And then they get, or the reading specialist in the school or the foundational skills teacher. And then additionally, they get supports and resources from the special education department. Those teams come together once a year to review IEPs for students that are not making progress, and then those IEPs are changed and modified to make sure that we are attending to the needs of the student. Something really important is that we are required to have one person at every school that is trained, and so every year we offer those trainings. And then there are schools that have all of their staff go through a training. There are a couple of really good resources, letters, and then ECRI that have like very specific protocols to help students get to these skills that sometimes they're lacking, and that will help them get to the next level in that trajectory. Okay, then I'm gonna go to question 6. And question 6 was about special education and the clinical practice program. And again, you have lots of detail in there. We have a couple of really important points that we wanna make is that about 32% of our current special education staff are staff members that went through this cohort. As a district, we know it's really, really hard to hire teachers for our special education programs. And so we needed to create the program ourselves, and that was created 10 years ago. 170 team members have gone through it, and 127 team members have stayed with our district. Now, the piece that made us change the program a little bit, and that's where you see that those additional FTE were added, were that in year 1 of the cohort, an employee, for example, was an instructional assistant that had a bachelor's degree, and then they said, I want to be a special education teacher. So we helped them get into the program. We have reduced credits. We help with a little bit of tuition. But they still had a job as an instructional assistant, and they were taking full classes in Western. And then the following year, we put them in a classroom to do the job for the first time in their second year of learning. And it was just really, really hard for them to stay in the job. The job is difficult, and it is the case management is also very complex. So this year, we have all of our applicants in classrooms in an internship role. They are learning as a general education teacher under the direction of a special education teacher. And then next year, once they get into their own classroom, they're gonna have all of these modeling that they got from the teacher under their belt to be able to do the job. We hear great feedback from the people that are that we are investing in right now. And before, we only got maybe 12, 15 applicants for the program. And as soon as we started communicating the changes to the program, we had 35, I think, 35, 38, up to 40 applicants that we were able to screen for those 10 spots in the clinical program. So it's a much an improved opportunity for our staff to do a job that we need them for. Thank you.
Question number 7, related to intergovernmental agreements and cost. You can see a summary there, and a little bit of detail about what's involved in each of those, highly varied in nature. Question number 8, I think Sarah is going to talk with us about, which is a question from Committee Member Jones about 410.
So as you look through our budget, you'll see in several places that there's a big difference, right, between the actuals and the budget, the two columns of the years. And what you're seeing in Food Services Fund, which was where the question originated from, is we're using 410 consumable supplies to balance that budget. We have an idea of how much we spend each year on our food services contract. That's the line for 15 million. And then the excess funds from the budget went on to line 410. And it's not that the budget increased that many millions of dollars, but it's that we tightened up some other lines that we could see that they're not using. And we do not hold our departments to line item budgets. So if they decide to buy a bunch of equipment for capital, computers, other stuff long-term, and they want to use a different row, that's absolutely fine. We got a similar question in a capital fund about why the capital line went up. It's because there was more budget available for spending. Does that answer it, Catherine?
What's in it? Like, if I'm a school, what do I put in 410?
410 consumable supplies is anything that is non-consumable. So it can be paper, pencils, anything that's cheap and gets used up in a year. 90% of what schools buy goes in there. In the Food Services Fund, we're probably not going to buy a lot of non-consumable or consumable supplies. We're probably more likely to spend that in the contract or on capital or something.
Okay, so it's like supplies, it's paper, it's...
Yes,
okay.
Office supplies,
Okay.
every supplies account you could think of.
Okay.
In PBAM, it's 410.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to go on to a couple of additional questions that were submitted by email later, but we did take the time to research them, and I will hand it over to Olga for the first two. And Olga,
Okay,
you
I'll
probably
read
need
the
to...
question. Yes, I will. Thank you. Okay, the first one was if we could please remind the team about the pre-K programs and where they went. It says, I know we made a cut last year, but could you expand on what our responsibilities were in this area and what it means that it's not on our budget anymore? So we have a grant for Head Start and Head Start Promise, and that all comes directly to our district, and we manage the grant, but this is not general funds. What we paid before for a few years was transportation for our students in pre-K programs. And we could not continue paying transportation. We were actually one of the last few districts in the state that paid for transportation for pre-K students. And we knew that was coming. It's part of a rule. And so we, one of our efforts was to try to get more preschool programs in neighborhood schools to allow families to walk to their pre-K programs. And we are serving the same amount of students that we did last year. We actually opened an additional classroom, and we're hoping to open a couple more next year. But the transportation component that we offered from general fund is what went away. The pre-K program continues. Next question I'll also address. I see that we're adding staff to our EL program. our English language learner program. Could you share how many welcome centers we have this year versus last year? I think some were closed last year, no? If so, were we able to reopen any of these with FTE additions? So there's two things we want to address here. The FTE increase is a combination of the dual language expansion FTE, that is 11, and then 8 are an adjustment that happened because of the enrollment count of our English language learners in schools. So it was an adjustment between HR and fiscal to match the number of students that are in our districts that receive these English language services. Now, when the question talks about welcome centers, I think is our newcomer centers, and we actually did not close any newcomer centers. We have the same number that we had last year, and this next year we are opening one in South Salem High School because of the number of students that we are, refugee students that we're welcoming in our system.
Thank you, and I'll take the question on if you could please expand on the additional salaries for summer school programs and the capacity of the programming given the line item being the same. So first, for additional earnings, the way that those work for summer programs is many of our staff who work just the school year, for example, our teachers, we pay them through additional earnings to be able to work the summer to provide that summer programming for our students. So any of our staff, and that's almost all of our school staff that are not 12-month employees, their pay over the summer would come through additional earnings or additional salaries. As far as the overall funding level, we are not proposing in this budget any reductions in summer programming. However, it does get complicated because we piece together a summer program from multiple different funds. Some of it comes from our general funds, some of it comes from the State Summer Learning Grant that we just received information about a few weeks ago, as well as a student investment account. So many of those items are pieced together across multiple different funding sources that braid to be able to support all the different summer programs that we have.
I'll take the next question, which is, are we cutting classified in guidance services, and what does this mean? We are not making any reductions. We are actually just shifting from Gen Fund into a grant fund.
All right, my question is, why are we adding FTE in student safety? Does it have anything to do with our weapons detectors? And the short answer is no. Previously, we had contracted services for security. We've almost entirely eliminated those, and this FTE just allows us to bring that service inside the district.
I feel like we're going really fast. Okay, number 6. What do the modifications in 2190 mean? We're cutting a licensed position, reducing FTE on classified, and adding supervisory license. So this is special education. In 2190 is supports, and so so the licensed position is not a reduction, it's a reassignment from support to instruction. So this is a person that served in the main office helping with case management or support to teachers, and we move that position into a self-contained classroom. So it changes from support to instruction. Then the change in classified is an adjustment based on the need of an office manager for the behavior center instead of a administrative secretary. So it's just a change in roles, and it appears as a reduction, but it adds as an office manager in the book. And then the 2 administrators were added for our efforts around redesign and realignment for special education. One is the assistant director, and the other one is a coordinator at the elementary level. We started the year with 2 coordinators, and the elementary level is the level that needs the most support with self-contained classrooms and redesign. And so we added the coordinator for that.
Okay, and then for charter schools, there are a few questions here, so I'm going to answer each of them one by one. First, for charter school payments, why is there a $900,000 increase to this budget? This can be found on pages 146 and 147. So we receive all of our state school fund revenue into general fund, which includes our charters. Under 360, charter school payments are estimates based on what we pass through to charters. So for example, we might have some of that reserve back for things that we provide them, they buy through us, but a lot of that flows directly to them through a pass-through payment. This is what this shift represents. So in this case, very particularly, Valley Inquiry Charter School decided to hire a lot of their own staff this year. So this shift is a shift from those staff being our staff and our payroll via our particular budget items, and instead a pass-through directly to them so they could hire those staff. Similarly, when you go down to the next question around consumables and materials, there's a huge decrease there of around $225,000. This is more in line with what they've spent in the past through us, so much more just accurate in terms of the numbers that they've spent previously. As far as whether they're going to afford it, yes. So in general, none of the actual dollars for charters are really decreasing. You'll see a slight decrease from about 9.5 to 9.3, but they ultimately get to decide how they choose to spend those pass-through dollars on their budget. And none of these are really netting out to be that different. So that $900,000 increase in payments is really just an offset from other budget items across the board. And if you look at that sum total at the very bottom, the net that we're passing to and the charters are spending are pretty much exactly identical.
Okay, I think there was only one more, and then we will, I believe, have addressed every question that we received. And Sarah actually addressed it a moment ago. There was a question about improvements and capital outlay, and specifically about a $500,000 increase. And Sarah addressed that when she was talking also about 410. So now we're going to take a breath, because that's a lot of answers to about 15 or so questions. We hope it meets your needs. We are certainly available to answer further questions in the discussion portion that's coming next. And I'll hand it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I know that that was an overload of information, and we'll move into public comment. So as a reminder, all audience members that are subject to the immediate removal if you engage in any abusive, threatening, vulgar, or hate speech, including speech articulated on signs and clothing, which violate the district's harassment and/or every student belongs policy. We provide an opportunity for public comment by virtual, call-in, in-person, or in writing. Electronic mechanisms are used for translation. Each participant has 3 minutes. We have a countdown timer on screen for monitoring time. The timer counts down from 3 minutes. At 30 seconds, it turns from green to yellow. At 1 second, it turns red and plays a short bell to signal time is up. Please be mindful of your pace for our interpreters. If the board receives written comment ahead of the meeting, the written comment will be posted on the district website. And tonight, one person signed up to comment. And then just as a reminder, public comment for the Monday Budget Committee meeting is currently open. And it will be open until what time? Friday at 3. Okay, so again, tonight one person signed up for public comment. Yadira Juarez, please come up to provide public comment.
Good evening, Budget Committee members. My name is Yadira Juarez from Salem-Keizer Coalition for Equality, and I want to speak tonight about what is important to keep supporting programs to help Latino students and to keep the bilingual and bicultural staff who work with them every day. Right now, the 40% of the students in Salem-Keizer School are Hispanic or Latino. That's almost half of all the students. Our schools are more diverse than ever, and we need to make sure every student feels included and supported. We know the district is going through a tough time with the budget, and that some hard choices need to be made, but programs that help Latino students are not extra. They are necessary to help close learning gaps and raise graduation rates. Many of our students come from homes where English is not the main language. At the same time, retain our bilingual and bicultural license and classified staff is crucial. Those educators as professionals build deep trust relationship with the students and parents. They not only speak the language of our communities, they understand the culture, the context, and the challenge. I also want to say thank you for your investing in to grow the dual language program. Those programs help all the students, and they show that district values every culture and language. So today, I ask you, keep supporting programs for Latino students. Make sure to keep the bilingual and bicultural staff who make a big difference, and remember that those support are not just helpful. They are key to real fairness and success in our schools. Our students and parents need to know that they matter. When we invest in them, we are building a stronger future for everyone. Thank you for your time and your commitment to help all the students.
Thank you. Okay, so now we will recess for a 10-minute break. And it is currently 6:36. I'm gonna shorten that to 9 minutes. Y'all can come back at 6:45. Okay, we are back. I said 6:45, y'all. And it is 6:45. Okay. So this brings us right into the meat of the meeting for today. I will now open the floor for any committee discussion regarding the proposed budget. So do we have any particular questions or flags? Yes, William.
The superintendent presented that staffing was the largest cost, yet on page 17 in our presentation, they're adding 30 more people. And it seems like we're headed in the wrong direction. We're supposed to be cutting, not adding. So it seems like we've got a problem there, I think. If there's 30 this year, then will there be 30 more next year and 30 more next year? So it seems like we're adding staff instead of cutting.
Superintendent, do you want to address that?
Yeah, we'd be pleased to. I do think it's an important observation. As we look into a multi-year future with personnel costs increasing at the pace that they're increasing, we do need to figure out a sustainability plan that keeps our schools fully staffed, but lives within the revenue the state is providing us. The additional FTE that I think you were referencing is, honestly, it's a targeted investment that we think is necessary and can pay off in the future. Most of those investments are in behavior interventions and supports for students who need significantly more than our traditionally trained classroom teachers can provide. So a large share of it is the staffing for the behavioral health center that will be opening at Straub, which will serve, I believe, around 40 or 45 students. I'm sorry, 60? 50 to 60 students at Straub. And for those of you who have children in our schools, spend time with our staff, you probably know that we do have easily that number of students who need intensive intervention and therapeutic and clinical supports.
Okay. Christy?
Sorry. How can we maybe make some of those reading teaching positions, convert those to reading teachers, some of the positions that we're adding? Is there a way to convert that to add some of those, or?
This is really a matter for the budget committee. We've presented the budget that we spent all year on working to develop. We believe it is the closest possible match that we can achieve to what we understand to be the immediate and midterm needs of our school system.
Okay. Yes, Satya.
So in page 16 and 17, under the staffing section, so we have the staffing general fund staffing allocation, title and non-title schools. Then I see Salem-Keizer Educational Association's target level. So I'm a little confused. For high school and middle school, we have less student to one teacher ratio compared to what the unions are asking. Is that what it is? Because our high school's target is 26.75 students to one FTE for title, 27.25 students for one FTE for high school in non-title. And so their numbers are 30, 35, 32, and 28.
Yeah. I can't really take responsibility for their numbers, but I can offer you an informed speculation. There is an important difference between their numbers and ours. They produce class size hard cap recommendations. We produce ratio-based recommendations.
Okay.
And as you work through, thousands of staff across hundreds of classrooms, the difference between a ratio and a hard cap becomes significant.
Do you mind explaining this? Because this became a lot of people in the community asked us last year also, what is the difference between ratio-based and hard number? Because sometimes it's very hard to explain that concept, that sometimes that can range. Some classes it may look like they are overcrowded, some may look 10.
Yeah, there is probably no one in the room has more practice than explaining this than Olga Cobb. So I'm going to actually ask her to talk about that phenomenon for elementary, and then I will talk about it a little bit for high school.
Thank you very much.
The idea around the ratio is that we are trying to maintain classrooms within two numbers. So for example, in kinder and second grade, we have one teacher for about 23 to 25 students when they are in a title school, and in a non-title school is about 25 to 27. And then it moves on within those ratios that include those two numbers. The proposal that the association provides us has just a hard cap. And so they, in their stance, as I understand it, the classrooms should not have, in the kindergarten example, more than 18 students. That is the only number. We just stay within the 23 to 25 as best as we can. Sometimes classrooms go over ratio, and so we have developed a process to provide supports to classrooms. So again, an example, if there's a kindergarten classroom that has 30 students, because there's higher enrollment in that school, then we provide an instructional assistant, or we provide additional time for the teacher, or sometimes there's actually one classroom right now that has 36 students in a kindergarten classroom. So we have 2 teachers now. And then at the beginning of the year, before we were able to hire, because the classroom just kept going up from 26 to 28 to 30 to 32, and now it's 36. So we had 2 instructional assistants full-time in that classroom, and then now 2 instructional assistants and 2 teachers in the classroom as support. So that is how we manage the supports for that range in numbers that we use, that are the ratios.
Thank you for explaining that, because I wouldn't have been able to explain that to the community when they were asking me this question. This is a question that people had, I think, last time also. So thank you for explaining that.
All right. Other questions,
Yeah.
comments? Catherine?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. The dyslexia. So I would love to see dyslexia support, and I wanted to address the response. And then also I have a question about curriculum. So I know firsthand that the school district does not support or provide adequate support, correct support for students with dyslexia. My son was diagnosed, it was caught, thank goodness his teacher caught it. When it's your first, you just don't know if this is, if they're, struggling, or if this is just how people learn to read. But he had an involved teacher, she caught it, he was screened, that is being done. What is after that, how the Salem-Keizer is addressing that is they stick them in a room with an IEP, and that's not to say that the IEP support specialists aren't involved and they care, they of course do, but they do not have tools to appropriately teach kids with dyslexia to read. There are tools that mankind has developed to teach children with dyslexia to read, and Salem-Keizer does not have those tools. And so I don't know what letter curriculum is. I just know I've been to multiple schools. I've had multiple parents. I have parents that have trained me. Again, my husband and I are fortunate enough to provide outside support, and through that, he is now reading. And with other dyslexia parents, they have to provide that outside support, and through that, their children are reading. Unfortunately, for parents that I know that do not have, cannot obtain that outside support, their children are still struggling. I think it is a core mission of a school district to teach children to read, to teach all children to read. And you at least statistically have about 10% of your kids that have dyslexia and do not have adequate support. So I would love to see, at the very least, Title I schools, and I don't know how many Title I elementary schools you have. You have 23? Have a person, and we can figure out curriculum, because I don't know, I do know you have very invested legislators that are also have dyslexia, that pass CAT with the intention that CAT would get down to dyslexia services. So I would love to see somebody trained properly in Title I schools teaching these children to read, because if they do not have that bedrock, they do not have the bedrock of properly reading, it's detrimental to their growth in any other area, like math, because when you go into world problems, you cannot decipher. I would love to see more of a focus around dyslexia, especially for our students in lower income schools. And so I am being very honest, that is a very big goal for me. And if it's a toe in the door with this budget, and I know we can add something to the table, that means the question now becomes, what are we taking away? I get that. But to be addressed later, but just so you know, that is a support, that is a really big thing for me, because I've seen these kids and they work hard and they work hard, and there's nothing more frustrating than seeing a child work and work and work and not have the results because they just don't have the tools. And I want to get them the tools. And I think that's a fundamental part of a school district, is to teach all children to read.
I think this might be a good time to take this important point, very well stated, and just step back into process a little bit so that we're all normed on what a proposed change looks like. I don't know if you're asking for a change. I think what you're certainly doing is advocating for the importance of a certain type of service. So in your original materials and in your packet, you'll see a document that is the Budget Committee Protocols for Questions and Deliberations. And so in the event that any of you, including Committee Member Jones, is asking for a change, you'll see a numbered process here. That is the process that the committee uses. And we can all read it. I don't think I need to read it to you, but I just want to call your attention to this as the mechanism through which actual change recommendations need to flow.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question on what Ms. Jones suggested about this dyslexia curriculum?
Let me just make sure that Catherine feels comfortable with the direction that we're heading.
Yes, and I think that, I will be recommending change. I think that can come in one of two ways, and at the end, we gotta get to a dollar amount. And so what I'm saying is the curriculum is not there to effectively teach kids with dyslexia to read. So I don't know if it's taking current reading teachers that are already in schools and giving them that training, and that's what we have to fund, or if it is finding a specialized person that already has that training and putting that, and I know that that's more. So I think, to me, as long as we have not just they're on an IEP and they're in a room and we're reading at them, but rather we have specialized criteria and training to teach them to read, is more what I'm, Does that make sense? So I don't know if I'm asking for to train people or if I'm asking you to actually obtain people. And that would be a different dollar amount.
Can I add a couple of things that may be helpful? First of all, I'm sorry about that experience, and that is not the experience we want for any of our students in our schools. I want to acknowledge that we haven't had the right assessment system to be able to understand the trajectory of a reader in the best way. We had a system called ECCBM that was the best system available for many years, but we piloted 2 years ago the STAR system with Renaissance, and it is a system that gives us really specific information about the learner and the trajectory, not only for an English speaker, but also for our ELs. We are actually part of a research that they're doing because of the implementation and because of our population. And with part of that, we are participating in a revision with the state around dyslexia assessments for English learners and for our English speakers. So I wanted to add that because it's a really point of focus for us in curriculum and instruction in elementary, and we agree with you. Having students that go into second grade that are not decoding and are not reading is a huge disservice to our community. And we take that really seriously, and we are working very hard on it. Now, the two trainings that I want to mention are both ECRI and letters. And those trainings assist teachers with very specific protocols that target the skills that help kids with the identifying, when they do in the assessment rapid naming, is so that they identify objects quickly, and that helps with letter recognition, that helps with identifying the symbols that represent sounds, that make words. So there's a full protocol that we have used, and it works to support readers. And we do that in the general education classroom, so we can help kids catch up, and we don't have to put them in an IEP if they don't need an IEP. So I wanted to just tell you all that because it's part of what we're doing. Adding the training, I don't think is an add for the budget because it's still part of what we're doing for professional development for our teachers. These letters training is what we're trying to focus on to offer it to more and more schools and more teachers in the primary grades.
Follow-up, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the letters, like, I don't want you to think my son's an edge case. He's not. I mean, there was like when we found out he had dyslexia, there was so many parents that came out of the woodwork to be like, we have problems too. And I have a lot of parents asking me saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do for my child. And so I just want to be clear, like, how did letters just start? Or are you saying it's in there, it's involved, and they shouldn't have any problems reading? Because there must be some sort of communication, like, breakdown, because I can tell you what's hitting the ground. And what's hitting the ground isn't effective training for kids with dyslexia. And again, dyslexia is a certain type of reading disorder. It's not just that they have trouble reading. They have trouble reading because their brain works differently and it sees things differently. And so if it's hitting the ground and it's already been implemented, I can tell you it's not effective. So if that's the plan A, is there a plan B?
Letters has been, for 2 years, offered to a few group of teachers.
Okay.
And so like 15 1 year, 30 the second year. And then this year we have 3 schools that have done full staff training with letters. And so right now we're tracking the data on those classrooms that have implemented this system so that we can then replicate as it works.
Okay. I'm going to go back and look at the curriculum, if that's okay, and just to make sure that it really is getting to our kids that, have dyslexia and like it's a recognized dyslexia form of teaching. Because they're like, something crazy like he has, he learns better through muscle memory. So his dyslexia teacher helps him with like fidgets and stuff that have certain patterns that when he sees the word, because the information gets to his brain better with physical it's weird, but it's how he learns. And so it's stuff like that, like it's different. And so I just want to, can I look at make sure it's dyslexic based? If they just implemented it, so 2 years ago, and it's in certain schools, so you probably don't have enough data to know if
Exactly,
if
this
it's-
year. Yeah, this year we're pulling data from those schools that have implemented it. I can send you information about the letters in ECRI.
And you are focusing on those because bilingual as well, those Title I bilingual students that have been diagnosed with dyslexia, is that correct?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, hold on. I'm gonna make sure that we can get through folks that haven't asked questions yet, and then we'll come back. I know that it's like a follow-up question, so we might have to go backwards in our conversation. Go ahead, Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just ask for a little more information around it sounds like new FTE investment in school safety. If I'm understanding correctly, from the last meeting, there was a contract in place with external security to provide some of this function, and we're getting rid of that contract and adding FTE to the budget. I just want to start, I guess, with saying for the past 4 years that I've been on this board, we've been talking about the need to continuously invest in behavioral health and mental health supports for students so that we are looking upstream and making sure that we're getting kids what they need prior to anything becoming a school safety or security level incident. And I know huge progress has been made by both superintendents that I've had the chance to work with. I'm just curious, I'm not seeing kind of a commensurate investment in FTE in the psychological services line item in the budget. I'm sure I'm probably missing where all of those staff sit throughout our budget. So that's one question. The other question is that I know that anytime you convert a contract into FTE, there are additional roll-up expenditures from biennium to biennium. And so there are going to be increased PERS costs and et cetera forever if we're adding FTE in that space. And was that anticipated in your kind of one-to-one trade-off of the contract to security professionals? And I know this is a lot, but are these individuals then that are already hired, or is it incumbent upon you to hire them after we approve this budget?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So kind of starting at the end of the question, these are staff some we have right now, and it's technical adjustments. They were mid-year hires, so they're already kind of performing the service for us. We did factor in the bringing on your own staff and bringing that in compared to the contract that we had with mostly Right Security at the time. They were providing, and this is not kind of a student focused thing. This is really about our property, our 24-hour monitoring, our alarm response for the burglar alarm or the fire alarm that goes off at night, and them kind of responding to our buildings when they're not in use by our students. So this is kind of a different safety lens than the campus security specialist in the school. So this is really about providing that 24-hour roving security and alarm response service to our district instead of having a per alarm response fee to a contract service.
All of those FTE, that's what they're doing?
Yes, those additional FTE are doing that. We actually ended up with a slight net savings after eliminating or almost entirely eliminating the Right private security contract. We did consider the PERS escalators. The private security contracts have escalators too. It's not like they stay flat. For us, we believe this is actually a significant step forward because it gives us a chance to train people in the way that we want security to be in Salem-Keizer. It gives them full onboarding through our student-centered training. It gives them full integration into a security team that does their work with a really student-centered and community-centered focus. But yes, we have almost 100 campuses, so to do 24-hour roaming, 365 days a year, it does take people.
Okay, so the campus security specialists are not in that part of the budget, or they are?
I think the question I can answer is that the additional FTE are just the conversion of the right contract into 24-hour roving. They are not the campus security specialists that you will see in other parts of our budget.
Okay. And was there any consideration of additional investment in mental and behavioral health supports for students, given what we're seeing in the, country around the behavioral health crisis for youth?
Yeah, we actually increased our mental and behavioral health investment this year by $7 million. Proportionately, it's certainly one of the fastest growing investment areas for us. We went from, I believe it was $46 to $53 million in mental and behavioral health supports this year, because we're seeing the same things that our staff are seeing, that you're hearing about. It is one of our most important functions right now.
Thank you.
Okay, circling over here, any new questions on this side?
Yes, please, thank you.
Patrick.
My question is about services that are being delivered to visually impaired and blind students. That's my field, and that since the School for the Blind closed, that was a big resource that the district was drawing upon, and now we've got some access to some resources through the Willamette Service District that they got some of the money. So I belong to a couple organizations, and I've had parents that have come up to me and said that they were feeling like their student wasn't getting enough resources, access to Braille, access to orientation and mobility, those kinds of very specialized services that blind students need. And so I'd like to see a little bit of a breakout to show what kind of resources are available to the students and the dollars that we're putting towards the blind and visually impaired students.
I think what I'd like to propose is that we're going to take some detailed notes on follow-up questions. I don't believe that's one we can answer at the table. And then we will make some quick staff determinations about how much research is required. For ones that require significant research or might not have a bearing on the budget, then we'll send it back to the committee through the chair for a vote. So we're going to write that down, hold it, and then we'll come back to it at the end.
Very good.
Okay.
So can I?
Yeah, if we don't have any new questions on this side, then we'll move into Satya.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just, from 48 or 46 million, now it's 53 million on mental health. So the part of the question is, these are Medicaid eligible children, and you have one staff, you have to start the process of how we can recoup some of the Medicaid dollars adding to us so that we are not taking it out of the general fund. So that, I'm glad that you started the process, and hopefully in a couple of years, we should be able to do that. But the question I really want to follow up with Ms. Jones is, and Ms. Cobb, you are sharing that you're using this assessment to identify dyslexia. So will that satisfy the requirement to say this child has got dyslexia, or is it just screens that the child is having some trouble reading, and there is a need for further testing in order to qualify for, yes, this is dyslexia and we need a different type of plan? The second part is you're talking about some specialized teaching tools. So roughly how much it costs, or I don't know if it's possible, if that teaching tools are purchased versus adding a staff who's trained to teach that. Because based on your numbers, like 10% of the kids or at least have some form of dyslexia or something pointing towards that. And with 24% of children being proficient in third grade, so it may be an investment that is worth thinking through. Is there an underlying dyslexia that our systems are not catching it? And until they kind of get to higher classes, grades. So it will be helpful if the curriculum investment, which caters to children who have dyslexia, and versus adding staff or training staff. And if there is a way we can think through, 10% is a huge number of, roughly 38,000 kids. So, but it's a good investment. To me, it is like ultimate social justice. If somebody can read on their own, that is the best way they can make a life for themselves. So that would be one part, because then we can start thinking in terms of what else, which are not student-facing. There are a lot of programs we can have, which is nice to have, but when we are struggling with this kind of budget, are they like laser focused on absolutely we need to have versus nice to have? There are some ways in which we can shift cost, which are not student-facing yet. At least make some critical investment, because waiting till they get to higher grades, we are going to lose a lot of kids who may get past without having the right intervention sooner. That's my thought. Any comments on that? Is the testing that STAR, is it enough for the state and everybody to satisfy that, make the diagnosis?
We're going to split that into two. I'm going to deal with, I think, a portion of your second, and then ask Olga to talk through STAR as a dyslexia screener. So the challenge that we have with your second question is that the parameters are just not nearly clear enough for us to really know what it means to cost it out. You're asking about the investment of materials versus the cost of people, but we don't know which materials and we don't know how many people. We don't know what kinds of materials, and we don't know what kind of training. Like, there's a lot of variables that would prevent us, even if we stopped everything and just tried to research that would probably prevent us from being able to present a reliable number to answer your second question. Though it is a worthy question, I don't think that it's one that's within our reach right now.
And then to address the first part of your comment, STAR addresses both the reading trajectory and it also screens students for the risks for dyslexia. And then provides teachers with next steps on how to address those risk areas. And then the other thing that I wanted to say on the 24% of our outcomes for reading and writing in English is exactly that. That is a measure that is done once a year and is done in English. So it doesn't tell the whole story when we have in our district 61% of our students who are English language learners and speak 120 languages. So STAR assessment allows us to understand where the student is also in their language trajectory. As an English learner, it gives us some really important points to understand how they're developing English as their second language, and then it gives us really good information in Spanish, and it also gives us important information for students who speak other languages.
Thank you.
Any other questions over here?
I was just curious about the STAR one. Thanks. What is that K through 12 or is it a certain period of time where they're tested in STAR?
It's K5 for English and Spanish, and then K12 for all of our students who are receiving instruction in English and Spanish who are in the dual language program.
One of the things that you might have also noticed in our overall deck was the expansion of STAR as an important benchmark test and a dyslexia screener system-wide. It does take time to roll out benchmark assessments like that. We're in our second year, correct?
Ashley?
It's me again talking about health and behavioral health and mental health. I noticed there's a significant reduction in FTE and health services under our grant funds. Is that like the wind down of some of the funds we won't have anymore? And are those FTE absorbed somewhere else in the budget? It looks like it goes from 87.46 FTE down to 45.
If you can give us a page number.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That will help.
120. Under grant funds. I was wondering if those had to do with ESSER or something like that. And I'm sorry if you talked about this already.
I think we're going to have to write that one down. I'm not sure we have the answer on the spot. I will say, I don't, off the top of my head, know of significant reductions in behavioral and mental health services, so we need to look into that one.
Well, I mean,
Sorry.
I don't think the question was specifically to the behavioral and mental health services. It was just 2130 health services. We had 87.46 FTE, but in this proposed budget, they're 45.25.
Can we get rid of nurses?
Health services is a pretty broad category, so we'll just double check it in the background real quick and get back to you. We did not, that I can think of, make any reductions, so I'm wondering if this is just a true up in the FTE that was disclosed and the average cost for the row. Because remember, most of our grants aren't written yet at the point when we put this budget together. So we're doing our best to bring you transparency and the information we can, but we don't know yet.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm, off the top of my head, I'm thinking, no, we didn't make a cut of 40 and not notice.
Okay, so the follow-up, I guess, is then if that's not an actual cut, do those FTE then show up somewhere else, like in the general fund? Because a grant is winding down and we've found a way to fund them
We're,
next time.
yes, or maybe even this time, depending on how answers come through.
Okay. And then I had one more and then I'll be quiet. Just, I heard some discussion last time, I believe in the overview of the budget, just around ending fund balance and our policy targets. And this has come up every year that I've been on the board where, you know, we talk about our policy and where everyone's comfort level is within that policy range. And I think I heard you say that, I don't know if it was around the $50 million target, if that's what's left, that actually is more risky for a budget, a district and budget of our size in this budget moment. And I might be misquoting the dollar amount, but I feel like your intent was to say our targets for ending fund balance might not be where they should be. And I wondered if, not literally where they are today, just meaning in general, should we consider as a board rethinking those policy targets? If there's not a comfort level in going to the bottom of the target, like spending as much as we possibly can and be within policy, should we think about changing it? Because I'm a person that tends to want to spend as much as we're allowed to in policy to get things into the classroom. But if that's not smart financial policy, I'd rather us adopt a new policy that is smart financial policy for the district. So just wanted to throw that out there. You don't even have to respond.
I want to throw out that it's a beautiful ending balance, Sarah. And I wish I had, like, all the state agencies have that ending balance, so thank you.
I know.
Well, I think then I must just only add to that to say that I understand your question entirely. I think it's one about the range of risk tolerance and risk assessment in a context, and the contexts are always unique. And to follow up on Sarah's point, where she in her final few days with us says, hang on to that ending fund balance, I do feel obligated to say that even in this budget, we're not hanging on to the ending fund balance. It's partially because we're stepping forward into a certain amount of risk by saying our schools need behavioral support and special education teachers and dual language teachers, and our district team needs some targeted supplementing to make sure that our systems run. And this is a place where we have to make decisions about where we're going to spend a little beyond my comfort range because we know that it's necessary in schools in the system right now. But I think that is why there is a range, because it reflects contextual differences and leadership differences.
Okay, so I'm gonna make another call for people that maybe haven't asked a question. We've got, I mean, there's like 14 committee members. I feel like I'm hearing from 3 or 4. So, Kelly, anything? Lisa? Olska?
All my questions have been
Chair, I do have a question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. The question is for Sarah. I have a question for you, and thank you for putting together the budget. The ESSER, I was looking at the abbreviation. It looks like we do have an ESSER type of relief fund. Were there any carryovers?
We used the last pennies of our ESSER funds early this fiscal year, and they are now gone.
Okay. I do want to mention, Chair, can I follow up?
Yes, go ahead.
I do want to mention that and emphasize the importance of being transparent on our spending. I was the one who talked about the contingency, and the contingency in the general fund is less than 15% of the total fund, total amount within the general fund, which means it allows the district to spend money by passing a resolution without having that, it limits the community oversight. So that's why it's another reason for us to be more intentional and more transparent about where we want to allocate our appropriations. And especially that impacts on the instructional quality. On page 71, our instructional staff development went down over 67%. So, so I'm just focusing on the availability, the appropriation, so that we can increase that, get that balance between the instructional staff development and give those tools for our teachers for that foundation skills for our students to increase their reading and math. And maybe balance it out with either, that's why I mentioned the ESSER carryover, if there was any ESSER carryover to help with that funding within the instructional staff development. It was more of a comment, that was not a question.
Okay.
Oh, I like that.
Jessica, any questions? Karina, any questions? No? Okay.
I think just a comment, you know, we talk about early literacy and how important it is, and that instructional early ages. I think it's also challenging as part of the budget where we kind of are coming through and looking at numbers, whereas some of those of us who are on the board get the opportunity to hear more reports around what is happening at the district in relation to instruction and early literacy. And I just kind of want to name that as a challenge, right, where we don't have the time and space for that deep debrief of what is happening. Some of, you know, I've heard about STAR and our plans to do this and our plans to expand, and of the gaps when it comes to our standardized testing, right, for third grade reading versus what our student demographics actually need, and the information that we actually need to have in order to assess and refine and adapt. So it's, I think that's just want to name the challenge of that, but also maybe an invitation for our next meeting, if there was, for the team to look at what would be really beneficial to share with the entire budget committee in terms of the work of early literacy. Because I hear your concerns, Catherine, and I think many of us sit there with the same questions, right? As I'm hearing the professional and staff development, I think all of those questions really come to, we want to make sure that our kids have the support that they need within the resource limitations that we have. But however that looks like, I'll kind of defer to you as well, Chair.
Okay. Cynthia, any questions? No? Okay. So, I mean, I haven't heard any members tell us that they plan to request a change to the proposed budget. So, I mean, unless I hear anything to the contrary tonight, I'm gonna proceed Oh, you have something? So,
That I would like to adopt a proposal to change to the budget to request that the district add 22 reading teachers. And my understanding is that we maybe need to leave it up to you to figure out where that fundage comes from.
No, according to the process, it is, and this is where if you look at this, this document, you'll see that if the change identified will increase the budget, which this would, then the committee member should be prepared to identify the area of reduction to offset the increase.
Okay, so should I may I refer to Rebecca to ask, or is that, okay, well then. So, and nor can I ask you to identify maybe 3 areas and categories that you might, okay.
No, and just to be clear, it's not personal choice here. It's that we've presented the best budget we know how to produce. If you have a strong instinct or a belief that it needs to be modified, then it becomes incumbent upon you to say, here is the part of what has been proposed that I or we may value less than the part that we're seeking to add.
Okay, well, because I think that our most vulnerable desperately need help, and I think that the community is gonna laugh at us when we ask for a bond and a levy soon, when we can't bring up reading, I believe that we should look at what is facing those vulnerable children, hoping to eventually help ours with dyslexia and everything in between, so for all categories. And so for things that may not be front-facing, I see that, in my opinion, equitable would be reaching all of those children. So maybe an obvious would be the DEI department, go ahead and reallocate funds to cover some of those teachers. So looking at our list of, for example, on number 7, intergovernmental agreements. So I see that on our website, it shows that our children do have bus passes, because I know we spoke of this at length last year about the value of the Chariot bus system for the children. And they still have those passes if the district does not contribute that portion momentarily to go ahead and try to help boost up these reading numbers, and maybe consider later down the road when we have more funding, something like that. In addition to safe routes to school, that provides more as well. So depending on the cost of 22 teachers, those are the 3 categories that I propose.
I'm going to restate to make sure we understand, and then I have a couple of clarifying questions. You're saying a reading teacher. I believe what you probably mean is a reading specialist, someone with the kind of training to really deliver excellent support using the science of reading. So I think that, we're all doing fast math here, but I think that what you're talking about is somewhere in the range of $3 to $3.5 million. We're not going to get there with the bus pass. We're not even close. You mentioned the DEI team. We don't have a DEI team, but maybe what you mean is the equity, the Department of Equity and Access.
Yeah.
Also, not enough money there. So you will need to keep going quite a lot farther in order to have a proposal that is going to net out at between $3 and $3.5 million in savings. And Chair, if I understand the process correctly, that would need to net to 0 or thereabouts before the committee could take a vote on the proposal.
okay.
And then the vote would not be to amend the budget, it would be to include it in a potential list for consideration at the next meeting.
Okay, so then the process would be that we're looking at the need to allocate $3 to $3.5 million in resources. And the proposition currently is that we're looking at, and I'm pulling up little document information. And so we have $140,076.50. Why was that so difficult? Plus, we've got safe routes to school, COG, membership, et cetera. Are you thinking that whole chunk?
59, because still then we'd be dropping it down to maybe 7 reading specialists. with
Okay.
those, which if we're trying to make a dent to bring scale up.
Between those two, we've got $199,077. You said that we don't have a DEI department, and it's, yeah, our equity and access. I don't know that we have something that kind of like, I would assume that I would see it in our back office spreadsheet.
No, because it's student serving.
Student
The entire
serving.
team is in schools every day serving kids and families.
Can I propose an alternative?
I just want a point of clarification around what is in that umbrella.
Yeah, of the equity access.
It's very vague to just hear it. But I think it's important that we understand what we're talking about under that umbrella.
Actually, I think it needs to go back to Director Hudson, as this is not a proposal that I would support and don't want to advance it unless there are specific questions that are important for us to answer for the benefit of the committee.
Okay. Catherine, you said you had something?
Yeah, and shout out to the Youth Pass supporters. It is, not to intertwine my two lives here, but it would be curious to know why, because in Portland, I believe the city of Portland provides the matching grants for Youth Pass to TriMet. And so I don't know why the city of Salem isn't doing the same thing in the Salem area. Do we know?
The city of Salem cut that out of their budget 2 years ago?
And they put it on the school, huh? Okay. Fun. So, yes, Youth Pass is an incredible program. I just wish that, I want to fund all the good things that our society needs, and reading is really important. So, I'm going to do this from a state lens, and I acknowledge that I have gaps and how that actually translate into a district lens. So, from a state lens, and I look at a lot of state agency budgets, this is a heavy administrative staff. Now, maybe that is typical for districts, but it is not typical for a state agency to have 7 HR managers and 38 HR support staff for a staff the size of Salem-Keizer. That's big. So I see that you pulled Portland. Unfortunately, I wouldn't say Portland's a paradigm of excellence in education, because we are at the bottom of the nation for education. So, and I want to reverse that trend for my society, for our kids, like that we're not bottom of the nation, because to be 50 of 50 is not fun. When adjusted for demographics, we're 50 out of 50. So, our kids need to read. And so I fully support finding reading specialists. I'm going to do something that we do at the state level, and I don't know, again, if this is at the district level or in the rules, but I would say, show me what 10% reduction looks like on your administrative staff. Now, when I say that, I mean these executive managers, directors, and all of the back office that reports. You gave me a kind of a chart on May 8th. I'm having to combine 3 different sheets to kind of get what your back office looks like. So show me what 10% reduction looks like. Show me what we're sacrificing if you reduce that layer 10%. And show me what that gains for a dollar amount wise that we can put toward reading instruction, especially for our Title I schools.
I do want to just acknowledge that, but also get back to the chair, because I feel that we now have got kind of a commingling of related but different requests. So I just want to swing back to Director Hudson, because I don't know if that was a handoff and therefore a transfer of your request to the new form that Committee Member Jones offered, or if we need to come back, address yours, and then come back and address the second one.
Well, I could ask, you crunched the numbers and you came up with that number, so you must have had an approximate quantum that a reading specialist would cost. May I ask what that is?
Yeah, reading specialists tend to be our most veteran teachers, very similar to foundational skills teachers. And so they're around 150,000 inclusive of all benefits.
Not so bad.
Because, because that, along with maybe one admin, would be about, well, less than three reading specialists. So, my next proposal that I have would be admin, if you can't think of a better place to suggest to cut.
Okay, so to be clear then, you're no longer requesting anything related to the Chariots Pass or our Department of Equity and Access?
No, maybe additionally. So with those two, the three that we discussed, so you did the calculation for what we have here on the, say for example, the Chariots and the 59,000 for,
The COG.
yeah. Yes, COG. And then in addition to, if we were talking admin, the admin for the equity department would leave one more, and that's 361,000, and, approximately a little less than. So if we cannot vote anymore, like, get a few more teachers out of that to at least come down to 7, something to put into our district to try to make a difference, to change this in the next year, to help with STAR and move this dial, bring it back up, so that we can show maybe our worth and value to the community a little bit. So hopefully they'll go ahead and consider our levy and bond requests. Then I guess I would look to admin. Like I said, if we truly can't pull any more, shift just a few more funds from that to try to cover all of our students, again, to help with reading.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this, because with the back of the napkin math, Chariots plus COG puts us at just under $200,000, and then you're saying maybe like throw in kind of like a random admin person somewhere, and ideally get to somewhere around like 300,000, and then be able to get the equivalency of reading teachers for that amount?
That's from the equity department is where I pulled that out. So if she needed specific, like, titles of people, which I didn't understand that was your question. It was just areas. And so again, I was thinking COG, Chariots, you look at possibly, and then a piece of equity department, which would be at your discretion of how many and what. And then on the topic of admin, because it sounded like you said that was not doable, then I was giving you an example of the admin position for that. That's 200, I can tell you exactly, I think. It's over 200,000 for that position.
Do you
So
have
that's where I came up with the 300.
like a line item or like a page number on the budget on like where you're getting equity department?
On this one, it's not on here. Equity FTE, it was on the 2325.
Okay. Don't forget your mic, please.
Please use your mic. I can't hear you.
I can use my mic. Was the offer for 22 reading specialists? And I think that's what I heard. And I'm curious how you came up with that number. Yeah. That's one question. And then I want to go back. I think we've had reference to a DEI office, and I don't think, from my understanding, that's not, it's about equity and access for children in the schools. And so I think having some clarity around that. So there's just two things I
know.
want to make sure I'm understanding both how we got to 22, and I think just for the good of all, a reminder of what equity and access is.
Okay.
Are you asking me a question? Oh, yes. The
Chair,
20
can I ask a follow-up?
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Let's I guess, answer that first question.
Okay. Well, I mean, it might be nice to have a reading specialist, honestly, in all of our elementaries, so that we can kind of hit that third grade reading level would be the goal. I know that that's not reachable. I was thinking of the Title I schools, and I thought, okay, 22. It sounded like that was never going to pass 22, so I thought, okay, what about 7? What about 7? Something to try to plug this in to try to make a difference and see if we can't change that before that comes up next year. Like I said, alongside these other new programs that we have to help boost. Because I feel like with the, I mean, we're already discussing adding FTE, that would be a reasonable request to try to plug in. And then, sorry, go ahead.
The only question that I have on that is, so the number 22 came to try and address like all the Title I schools. But I just want to understand like a little bit deeper on your question. It's to add the reading teacher to each Title I school. But I think we have a reading teacher for each elementary school.
We have a reading for every elementary school. And we have had for always, we never cut them, for everyone. We're not just talking about Title I, because I didn't specify in my request that I wanted them for Title I. You just, when you mentioned a number, I was thinking of, because my vision, as I shared with you last week, was to go towards, I'm sure we have stats on the most needy, the most vulnerable. So whether it be ones that, you know, whatever child that's not looking like they're going to hit that mark, and not just one category, but every child before third grade, what are our most severe looking schools, and can we add them there? And so, again, per our discussion, it sounded like, you know, obviously, and I know that, we cannot make the full leap to all of them to help, but can we make a dent? So that's where the small number of factoring 22 just with rough approximate calculations went. But again, if the pushback is too great for that, I'd be happy with 7. So,
I mean, then you need to pick a number, because we can't help you with this.
7.
Okay, so now you've got 7. Now,
7.
In order to advance this as a motion for a committee vote, well, it's not even required, as an issue for committee vote, procedurally what would happen is you need to say, this is the amount that it will cost, this is where it will come from, and this is how we will pay for it through a reduction in another area. I'm as yet unable to discern those two edges from what you're sharing, and so we're mostly just waiting and assisting as we can. But what we're not going to do is offer up ideas, because this budget represents our best work. We will explain why it's our best work. Okay. But we're not going to. We are not going to help it troubleshoot its adjustment in a direction that is the will of the committee, but certainly not the will of the team.
So,
Chair, could I? All right, okay. I know that this is getting everybody real excited, so let's wait. Satya had his hand up a minute ago.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So since, Chair, thank you very much. Since you kind of raised that possibility, in this tight financial situation where we are thinking of, what I'm hearing is targeting education, especially reading in little children, catching them sooner. Can we at least take a look and ask ourselves, for example, the transit? We have school buses for children, and can we at least use that money along with that 59,000 and start either a curriculum that is specially meant for reading, or adding 1 or 2 reading specialists, part-time reading specialists, in addition to what one reading specialist per elementary school. You know, with some of the schools, with just like we heard the number, that may not be enough. But we have to start making some change. I mean, it's ideal to have the bus passes. I am fully with you on that. But in this time, it's a kind of a toss-up between, you know, how can we just make sure all our children are able to read so that they can eventually read to have a good trajectory in this country, and, you know. So it's a very difficult choice. But 140,000 plus 59,000, could that at least get us one extra teacher? Because at least we'll add some more children in the right direction. That's what I'm thinking of. And can they use our school bus instead of taking chariots to come to school and go home? So, because, I mean, ideal, if you had plenty of money, we should add all the services. But right now, that is not an option. Plus, I'm a little hesitant about changing the rules around the end fund balance. That's like changing goalpost in the middle of an uncertain federal times, etc. It costs about, at last time, what I learned is about $40 million to make payroll 1 month. So if this time the end fund balance will be like, what, 53 million or something that's a little bit over, it's like 5-6 weeks. That's taking a lot of chances. It's not a good thing because it'll affect our bond rating. It shouldn't push us into a financial insolvency. So I'm really, really worried about end fund balance policy being altered. It's more than the policy. It's the financial health of our institution is absolutely critical, especially with so much of federal uncertainties, etc. We need that little bit of that cushion to dip into. But can we at least start with adding one position with 140,000 plus 59,000 so that we make a difference? Just a way to look at it. And once we get some good funding, we will try to get bus passes or maybe gas passes or whatever else is possible.
Kelly? I didn't ask you earlier.
You did. No, it's all about what we're talking about right now. Thank you. Okay. I want to lead by just acknowledging that I think the concerns expressed here are universal. I don't think anybody disagrees with the importance of reading, especially. That is one of the 4 R's. I think I'm developing real concern here, though, that we are inverting a logical process. If there is money to be cut to spend somewhere else, we haven't even talked about what the priorities for that would be. Reading is very important, no question. Don't disagree at all. So are speech and language skill development. And we know that we have deep deficiencies there based on lack of resources and a labor market that makes it hard to actually even fill positions that you have there. Director Carson Cottingham has pointed out that we have serious mental health deficiencies in the district. Now, I'm not saying we should all accept those and just say, well, we can't solve any of them, so let's just rubber stamp the budget. That's not my point. My point is we're working really hard to cut things on a single issue that clearly we all care about. But if we can actually cut, we should be talking first about what the highest of highest priorities are to put that money toward in the first place. So this is only a comment, I think, but if there's a will to dive in and really go line by line and ask where could things be cut, I think that we should first decide whether or not, or what that would actually go towards, what the highest priority is. We're working really hard on a single thing, the only one that we've actually discussed tonight, except for a handful that have been mentioned, but it's the only one that's been discussed in any detail, and there are lots of others that should deserve the equal time. Again, I'm not at all in favor of a rubber stamp. I love this process, but it starts to sound to me like we're asking to do a process that several highly qualified people have already engaged in, which is to figure out what the deficiencies are, figure out what the resources are, allocate the resource based on historical trends, knowledge of demands, personnel that we have, things like that. And that unless we have a really compelling reason to question that, surgically cutting it up one little piece at a time, I fear causes more damage than good. So that's my concern.
Catherine?
Following up on that, I think what you're hearing is a committee that is very concerned with our test scores and where we sit on the national report card, which is low. So maybe there is a plan, going to Kelly's point. I mean, you guys know schools and education, and maybe I just need a more rousing answer because, Superintendent, I think you and I talked, if I were in your position, that would have lit a fire in me to get to my kids to make sure that they were reading and they had the math skills to go. So maybe there is a plan in here and we're just not seeing it. Of here's what we're gonna do for reading, here's what we're gonna do for math. So we can get those test scores up. Now, you and I talked and you said it's a cultural issue. You know, maybe we don't take testing like seriously enough, so we don't communicate that to our kids. And that is true, it hits close to home. I have a culprit who is 9 years old, and she freely admitted that she just pushed buttons because she wanted the Smarties at the other end of the test. So educating at home that testing is important, she needs to pay attention to it, she can't just push the buttons to get through it. So yes, it's a culture, but also like, what is the plan? What is the plan? And how is it in here?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point, and it actually kind of goes back to the point made by Karina about the gap, the knowledge gap that might sit between the board and the budget committee, because this year the board actually just about a month ago adopted the plan. So one thing we can do is send you all the whole plan. It is extremely focused on student outcomes, and specifically the ones that we've been talking about in depth tonight. It is extremely focused on reading. And that plan was developed alongside this budget so that we would have our resources invested in the parts of the plan that are going to have long-term durable impact. And the budget was developed alongside the plan, so it went back and forth. We will be happy to send you the fully adopted board plan. You're asking for it. The good news is, it exists, this board has already deliberated over it, and it has been adopted.
Has it been approved, sorry?
Yes.
By teachers?
Well, the teachers don't adopt, but it has been informed by teachers. We worked with teachers to develop it. We worked with our labor partners to develop it. So it has been informed by a large number of stakeholders.
Okay.
Okay, Cynthia?
She stole my mic.
I don't have any questions, but I have several comments. Being a 46-year educator, elementary, middle school, and high school principal, I've listened to the discussion, and I just have some points I want to share. First of all, if kids can't get to school, they can't learn to read. We're trying our best to increase sense of belonging. So some kids could not participate in our extracurricular activities because they wouldn't have a way to get home. Next, we put Saturday school in. There are several kids that don't have cars. Their parents don't have transportation. They were able to catch the bus and come to our schools and get the help they need with their homework. Transportation is a huge component. Test scores. Our students have the option of opting out of state tests. And can I tell you from my experience, it's normally our top students because they have AP testing, IB testing, all types of testing that they feel is more important to help them with their future goals. Next, reading specialists. They would have to be bilingual. Hearing the number of languages we have in this district, 108. So we could say we want to hire them, but can we find people that can speak the languages that have the reading skills to be able to help our students? If not, we would be posting these positions and we would have these vacancies. So these are things I think we all should take into consideration when we're talking about making proposals and changing this budget that has been recommended to us. Thank you.
Chair, I just want to let you know that Jean has her hand raised on Zoom for a while.
Thank you, Aaron, because I cannot see Zoom, and I blame the powers that be on the IT world. Go ahead, Jean.
Cynthia, you just said what I wanted to mention. I wanted to say that funding, I wanted to mention to the budget committee members, funding a single FTE should not come at the cost of a student accessing the education. So I urge our budget committee to explore other funding resources, but do not negatively impact a student's mobility or opportunity for education. So that's the comment I would like to say. It does, if you do focus on that, it does lead to not other disadvantages, such as it leads to tardiness, leads to dropout risk. I have been a adjunct professor. I have been a pre-K teacher and as well as a substitute teacher. And I do know, and I'm aware that having access to attend to school is very important. So the bus pass is a very important tool for them to reach their education. I do have one question. Can I do a follow-up, Chair?
Go ahead.
Sarah, I do have a question on page 71. The instructional, what's that, 2240? What's it called? Instructional staff development. That is where there was a big decrease of that 66%. Is that where a lot of the layoff that has happened within the district the last few years? Is that correct? Is that the reason why there was a big decrease from 33.8 million to, I'm trying to get to it really quick here.
So if you look at the page before, if you look at page 71, I think you're looking at the 5 FTE decreasing to 1, and those were actually just moved to function 2210, which is improvement of instruction because it was a little more aligned with what they were doing. So they weren't actually reduced, they're focused more on curriculum.
Okay, and was it for 210, that the same dollar amount was also shifted there?
When we move FTE, we move the current year costs, so it would probably be a little bit higher.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and, because we have an issue on the table, which is the ask of, can we find money to add in reading teachers? And the onus is on the budget committee to find a way to balance that out. Do you feel like you found a place to help budget that out?
I mean, if we can't take away from the FTE that we're already gonna come out of this adding to add the 7, I mean, I can just ask that and you can tell me probably straight up yes or no. You told me in length last week the depth of the hurt that would cost the district, in your opinion, to not add those positions that we were going to add. So that is why I pivoted over to this area. So I can guess how you're going to respond. So I'll repeat my, if I could, thank you for all of your patience and grace, everyone. So if I could ask that instead of some of those, we add 7 reading specialists. I mean, I could do that. It's either one or, I mean, is that feasible?
Well, we can afford anything, we just can't afford everything, so you would need to pick the total fully loaded cost of 7 reading specialists at about $50,000 each, and tell us where you would like to cut to create a net neutral fiscal impact. And then I think we can be more helpful because then we know the direction you're headed.
So
Chair,
then,
can I just make a point of order?
Okay.
We have this proposed process, which is not exactly Robert's rules, so I think that this is a little bit confusing, but I will say I'm not in favor of the proposals that have been placed on the table thus far, but I do feel the need to say that I think it's unreasonable to expect people on the budget committee to know how to on the fly make dollar for dollar swaps in an extremely complicated, hundreds of pages budget without the financial tools of the district. So I feel like if Director Hudson would like to make this recommendation that we would vote on after the chair tees up any other changes, then I think that needs to be clear, and my request would be that it gets taken offline and worked on. That requires work of the district. So if, should we take a vote on whether that's a priority to spend your time on, then you create the proposal, bring it back, and we decide then? Because the on-the-fly trying to do it feels hard, and it feels like there's a major power imbalance between the budget committee and the district that we're not going to remedy by continuing to do this.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question just to understand this issue a little bit?
The issue
With
on-
what we were discussing, because Chair Richardson also kind of gave some very good points. So I just want to have clarity for the sake of clarity. Is that okay? So, we are talking about third grade reading as the target. That was one of our goals, right? We are not talking about AP classes or taking AP tests. We are talking about third grade, the little kids reading. And I'm not sure how many of those little kids are taking Chariot's bus to come to school. I hope we are still having transportation available for them as part of our Salem-Keizer transport, the yellow buses that go around. I think it is a very targeted question rather than general questions. I agree that if they are going for AP classes in high school, they are less likely to take whatever state test. That is a different thing. The high school kids have more agency to come to school. Some of them work. But we are talking about very little children. And I hope they are taking our Salem-Keizer school buses to come to school and adding that, whatever we are talking about, a reading specialist who can help with the dyslexia for children who need a little bit more than what one teacher per school is able to handle, would be a good starting point. That's all we are saying. And where is that money going to come from? At least for now, what if we take that mass transit passes that we give and that another 59,000, that will be like a one salary line. I'm not saying once we have all the guarantees of federal money and everything else and the financial situation improves, then we can talk about, bus passes for children or gas money for children or whatever else we can create those options. But right now it's a tough choice between in this uncertain funding, because each child who loses out and able to read by third grade, we are talking about a whole trajectory. Later they can't read to learn. So we are talking about changing the whole trajectory of children, especially from immigrant families and other families who, it's really important that if at home parents may be speaking some other language. I really want them to have the opportunity to learn English in school and be proficient, because they also need a chance to succeed in this country. So it's important to have bus passes, but I really think ability to read proficiently, especially in English language, is a civil rights issue. It's a social justice issue. Otherwise, the whole generation will have to wait because parents are not able to help them. So I'd rather, if I had to choose between these two, bus passes versus a little child learning to read.
It's 140,000.
Yeah, 140,000 plus another 59,000. If you add, at least we can create one extra person. My grandmother had to use a thumb impression as a way to, because she couldn't read. So I really think we are talking about two different issues, where AP testing.
Satya, can you please ask the question?
My question is, let's not leave this question about adding a reading specialist, because to me, if I had to pick a choice, a third grade child being proficient in reading is a very important milestone. And I would like to see if the budget committee starts thinking in terms of, can we at least swap this, cut these two for this time, and add an additional staff to help them start reading. And then maybe when we are having financial surplus state in future, we can start bringing back the bus program and COG investment. That's my proposal, please.
Thank you. Chrissy, since that is not your proposal, how do you feel with that question?
Well, since essentially we have to vote on this as a committee, whether or not we pass the request to the district, my understanding to add maybe 7 reading specialists, then I would hesitantly ask that we would reduce $1,050,000 in the budget for the new FTE admin that we were going to add, and add those 7 reading teachers, specialists.
Okay, so then the question is, can the district craft a proposal or recommendation that would equate to a reduction of $1,050,000 in admin services to add 7 FTE that are specifically reading specialists for elementary schools?
I think what I would love to do is ask Rebecca to join, and I want to restate that just in a slight way. I think that we're now much closer to something that we can talk about because it's got specific boundaries. So I believe what Director Hudson is asking is $1.5 million in a reduction to an unspecified, but clear enough for now, administrative function. And I think you specifically said the additional FTE that are part of this budget. And then redirect that savings to an instructional support line that would be focused on reading specialists. I want to say what I understand happened, and then I would love it. Or actually, why don't we just have you clarify exactly the process that needs to happen next as it relates to this, the vote, and what happens afterwards?
Sure. So good evening. So what you have now is your first proposed change, right? That you've formulated the add and the takeaway. So that now goes to the list. You would then survey the rest of the budget committee to determine, are there any other proposed changes? And then once you have the completed list, then you would go through and vote on each of those proposed changes, which would then lead to the potential of the district doing the work to come back to you with that proposed change, what that would look like.
Okay.
That's what I understood.
So we have this proposed change, specifically how you stated, Superintendent Castañeda. Are there any other proposed changes?
Can I just add to make sure, if we have to get verbiage precise, that the reading specialists would be applied to the most needy schools, elementary schools, with the lowest scores or mark as far as the foreseen ability for them to reach the 3rd grade reading level, if we need to add that in there specifically. I mean, I would assume it would automatically be applied there, but if I need to add it to be specific, then that's
okay.
Can we make that specificity?
It's, I would say it's right on the edge of, I mean, in some cases, we've teetered over the edge of what the committee has got the authority to do. So, but in this case, let's just call it an edge case and say that we would share your desire to serve the schools with the greatest need and could incorporate that into a possible eventual proposal. What I do, as I believe that the next step is to take this to a vote in the way that's specified in this protocol, I will take the opportunity just to share that as defined, what this will do is diminish or in some cases debilitate core functions within the district, and specifically our support services for schools. And it will add 7 vacancies that we will not be able to fill. In other words, we will lay off people who are doing work that we desperately need, or we will be unable to recruit work that we desperately need done, and we will post positions that we probably will not be able to fill this school year. When we brought you this back office information, I will share exactly how I felt about it, which is 2%. I struggled to know any fair, comparable K-12 analog that will show you back office services below 2%. And I respectfully disagree with you, Committee Member Jones, that a state agency is somehow comparable to a K-12 school. It has to be industry-specific for a comp to hold bearing on the discussion of our variance above or below. Also, state assessment results don't tell us about back office services. What they tell us about is the seriousness with which the system is taking instruction and the quality of instruction students are receiving. It doesn't tell us whether or not a school system has one too many people or one too few person in, print services. Those two are unrelated measures of one another. We are bringing you an extreme austerity budget. When we tell you that we need a recruiter to recruit for the vacancies that are producing some of these challenges, we're not exaggerating. When we tell you that we need, a great person to be an assistant principal in schools that are elementary schools that are 500 kids, and the principal is by him or herself, we're not exaggerating. When we tell you that our financial team needs an additional accounting clerk, we're not exaggerating. These are people who are one level deep in a system that is the second largest employer, the largest server of food, the largest transporter of students, the largest service provider of in-person services every day. So I only ask you, as you consider the question that's being advanced, about this fundamental choice point that exists today in committee, which is, do you believe that you know that $1.5 million, and in effect, a clear but arbitrary number, is somehow the right amount of cut to district administrative services, and how do you know that? And with that, I'll send it back to the chair to take the next steps in what is increasingly now an actionable voting item.
Okay, so do we have additional proposed changes to the budget aside from this proposed change?
Chair, I do have a comment.
Yes?
My comment is with the question that Chrissy mentioned about the having FTEs to support the, I'm assuming it's the Title I schools. I'm looking at our budget, and we have quite a few grants that provides a lot of the support that they need to specifically Title I. These are specific grants, is what I'm reading the description of these grants. They cannot be spent anywhere else except those specific areas. I'm not sure that there is that lack for the Title I or II that Chrissy may be mentioning. I do agree that reading and math can be improved. They definitely need that, and finding that balance is really hard. The district did a really great job with the budget, and it's really hard to find those resources to get those funding for those reading and math. I'm looking for the instructional staff, but yes, it's been very difficult. But I'm looking for not taking away adding more what's already there and available. So my question is, does the budget committee see that there are grants already dedicated to those specific areas? That why are we adding more and recommending more for something that's already provided to them?
Board Chair, can I answer some of that for that comment? I want to point out that every elementary school this year has a foundational skills specialist that is funded through some of those grants, the early literacy grant. And the job of the foundational skills specialist is to focus in K-2 literacy. And so they are doing small groups, they're doing data. And remember, the STAR assessment is now fully implemented in schools, but this is the first year of full implementation. Last year was a pilot, this year was full implementation. So we also need to give our staff some time to know the assessment and for these foundational skills professionals to develop the role that they're in to support the schools. The curriculum department has also developed a full scope and sequence that is being implemented this year to train these teachers as reading specialists, as the people that know most in the classrooms and in the school about the trajectory of readers. I'm just adding these because it's an important, I think, piece of information for you, because all these things that are components that we believe are going to help us make changes into the outcomes are just being implemented fully this year.
So I think we have the proposed change of the 1.5 million to add the 7 FTE. So per our procedures, y'all don't, if you don't have ADHD, don't like somehow absorb it, because then words just disappear. Okay, so we have identified our list of changes. I've asked if we have an additional changes, so thus our list is 1. And so beginning with the first proposed change on the list, the only one, the committee member who recommended the change will give a brief 1 or 2 minute explanation of why they believe the change should be made and what the impact is to the proposed budget. So I'll give you another 2 minutes to share with us on that.
Thank you, Olga, for sharing what you shared. And I don't remember off the top of my head, but I would have liked to ask the trajectory of the goal and percentage that we hit. And we must have discussed it prior, but I don't have that in front of me. But I don't know if you know it off the top of your head. How soon we expect that the methods that we currently have acting in place to adjust our 3rd grade reading level, basically?
We want to jump high numbers. We have developed a chart that has been shared with the board on those different key points that we have in the next 5 years, and we are at 24. I know Jonathan is going to help me with the exact number. We are at 24% right now, and I think we have to, for next year, hit 28.5%, something like that, but it's 28.3% in the trajectory of improvement. 28.3% is not good enough for us, so we're trying always to exceed that mark, but that is the next level that we are planning to hit for progress.
Shout out to Deputy Superintendent Cobb for being only 0.2% off of our goal.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your sharing again in the 5-year plan. And that is what I thought I remembered. And so I would just like to propose a motion for 7 reading specialists for the district.
Well, we've got that on the table. So that's the change of the list. So we talked about the change, the impact that it would make to the proposed budget, which is essentially adding 7 FTE is the reduction of at least a few admin staff that would, per the superintendent's recommendation, really negatively impact the core services of the district. So now, by show of hands, we need to see if the members concur that this proposed change should be on the list. But considering the fact that we have a list of 1, should we just skip to number 3?
It feels like the chair can make that decision.
All right, so the chair is making the decision. That we have
Actually,
our
point of
final
order.
list of proposed.
Who's
Kelly? Is it to add
If,
something to the list?
but it's a point of order. Shouldn't we be allowed, from my point of view, to kill this on the first vote before it actually gets voted on the second time? Because the threshold for the first one is only 6 votes to stay on the list. The threshold for approval is 8 votes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if you make me bring this up twice. All right, so the first one is by show of hands. We need the show of hands is to decide whether or not this proposal stays on the list. So by show of hands, do the committee concur that this proposed change should be on the list of proposed changes to the budget? Raise your hands if you believe that this proposed change should be on our list. So we got 1, 2,
Three.
3, 4. Wow,
Four.
Wow, Kelly, you were really banking on that.
Just want to check online.
Jean? Because I can't see you.
I don't have my hands up.
Okay, so that brings us 4, and so that means that it does not maintain on the list. So there are no proposed changes to the budget, which brings us back to our point of we're going to proceed with the budget as we have. And our next meeting is going to be Monday, May 19th at 6 p.m. And I will now adjourn our current budget meeting. It is,
Wait.
that is 8:23. What?
Why can't we end it today then, if that's the case?
Yeah, I do have a change that I would like to see, so we're not shutting that down, right?
Well, I asked multiple times if we had additional proposed changes.
I thought you meant to
list.
hers, not to.
No, just like to make the list of proposed changes to the budget.
Can I add one? It's quick.
Let's
Promise.
run back.
I would like to restore ending fund balance in memory of Sarah, but I really do. I am concerned with the ending fund balance with these additional changes. I have seen multiple agencies without ending fund balances that are healthy. It's a cash flow. When what happens if you get into recession, it's not good for the next year. And I just don't want to set us up for failure without a very healthy ending fund balance. So because we're adding staff, which made our black line go down, is that correct? So what's our ending fund balance if we adopt this budget? Is it
7 point something.
It's at 10%, is that correct, Sarah?
No. 7.6 or something.
That's too low. I think so.
Well, Sarah, what is going to be the ending fund balance?
It will come in higher than that. You have a couple open items, right? You're in bargaining.
Okay.
But if things go well and our leadership has been really good about managing expenses, you will land higher than where the budget is built. Does that make sense?
And so the budget has us at what for the ending fund balance?
It was built at 53 at 3%. And she showed you a graph that showed you that we had spent an extra 3 already. So we're sitting at about 50 million.
50 million, which
Yeah.
is what percent?
I think it's just about
I got a degree in
7.
religious studies, not math.
I think it's just about 7%, over 7 still.
Over 7%. Okay.
That's not good.
So you landed us, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna bring
Okay,
you.
follow-up, Chair. Sarah, you landed us really good, and I really want to commend you and thank you on behalf of the Salem-Keizer community for how well you did this ending fund balance budget. I was very pleased as soon as I saw this slide. I want to make sure that we land equally as well, because I can't guarantee that next year when we do this, it could be a cut year. I mean, we don't know where the economic, maybe because I'm on May 14th and we didn't have a good rosy picture today. I am concerned for next year, where we're not talking about ads, we're talking about cuts. So are we, before you depart, are we going to have a healthy ending fund balance? Like, what's your gut? Because I'm nervous with 7%.
I think if you trust your leadership and you're tough on negotiations, you'll come in higher than that. But you are going to have troubles building 27. So you're going to have to think about it. I don't know that you need to make a change in this moment, but I think the exec team needs to continue to do what they did this year to help us land and watch. And we've been really thoughtful on posting positions and really looking at them. Not that we're holding back in schools. Rumors always get started whenever I say that. So I think that same leadership is going to continue. Olga is out there and looking at classrooms and looking at class size all the time. And we are not just adding because that rumor came out. She's out there counting kids in classrooms and looking at things all the time.
Okay, so your gut is saying we're at 7%, but if bargaining comes in tight, we're going to be okay in that 10 to 20% range. Yeah. Because I don't think next year's, my hunch is that next year's not going to be good.
I just want to ask a
Hold on.
clarification,
Hold on,
sorry.
we've got a hand up over here, Jean.
Thank you. Sarah, I know I've been talking about this the whole time in the beginning of the budget committee. The terminology on the ending fund balance and contingency to me means different. From local budget law standpoint, it means contingency is money you can spend during the fiscal year. Unappropriate ending fund balance means money you cannot spend during the fiscal year. So what I'm concerned about, and I mentioned before, is that there is that 53 million, that 7%. I don't look as you moved it from unappropriate ending fund balance to contingency, but you did through the PBAM as a reserve. I think that's how it's labeled. But it's money that can be spent during the fiscal year, is my understanding as when you spoke. So that is where my concern is that money can be spent and it's less than 15% of the fund, of the general fund. That means community do not get involved with how that money gets spent. Actually, it's just a board that passes a resolution and you can spend it according when it's needed. This is a biennial type of budget. So that is where I'm a little bit stuck on which should we determine what amount should be used for this thinking of the 25-26 fiscal year, and also remember it's also a biennial type of district. So just clarity, this is really not an ending fund balance where it cannot be touched. It's actually money that can be spent during the fiscal year of 25-26. Is that correct?
Brief interception. If we did have to make addendums to the budget, we would be opening up a hearing, right?
Depends on the scale.
Okay. So then to the question of if we had to, can we spend that $50 million?
If you had to, you could do it through resolution in the board. The reason that I don't put it in unappropriated money is if Rome is burning, then you couldn't spend it. So it would no longer be emergency money if you needed it. But we try to hang on to it. Those of you who have been around for a while, we take contingency and fund balance very seriously, and we try to avoid touching it.
Okay. All right.
Follow up, Chair?
Go ahead.
I'm not sure with the PBAM. I'm familiar with the local budget law, but with the PBAM, what is the line item for reserve for future expenditure type, where it's a reserve, but it's for the next year? What line item would that be considered?
That would be an unappropriated fund balance, or if you had a reserve specific for a building. That's
So
just
would
an
you
example I
under
picked.
which function code? Is that the 6,000 or the, and the reason why I'm discussing this is because there is that money that is available during our fiscal year of 25-26. And keeping in mind we're a biennial, we are budgeting for we have 2 fiscal years. So it's just important we want to be transparent and intentional how that money is going to be spent. It's not necessarily, it is our ending fund balance and it's unappropriate for the next fiscal year. And what was the function? I'm sorry.
The function for unappropriated fund balance is 7,000, and we don't use it.
And you don't use
for the gen fund.
For the flexibility, as you mentioned.
Correct.
So Chair, can I?
Yes, Satya.
Thank you. This is, it feels like deja vu again, kind of revisiting. This is my 6th year. And, my caution is we kept using the end fund balance to balance our budget, and we ended up ourselves in a very difficult situation. We were if that trajectory had gone on, we would have just been left with, say, 2 weeks worth of payroll. And that is a very difficult time we went through. And I think we should learn from that lesson and make sure that we stay in the higher end of the end fund balance. I think from what I learned so far, ODE will disperse the money 11 times a year. And there are so many other ways in which they will calculate. So it's not like they give you the entire money. And for some reason, if there is delay in the disbursement, we still have to make the payroll. We still have to take care of it. Once there was a leaky roof or something like that, and we had to kind of do things, we had to end up buying some internet hubs when COVID hit us. So there are a lot of things happen in a school system like this. It's very tempting for us to kind of spend it, but then I would be very careful not to go through the same kind of mistakes that we made over the years, because that really brought us in a very difficult situation. Sometimes when we add a staff, there are some risks to it. We have to really start thinking in terms of every year there's COLA and step increase, etc. We'll have to think several years ahead and see how financials will look like. Based on that, we make those changes. Otherwise, same thing with one-time grant. If you add somebody like a staff, then what do we do when the grant ends? So these are some points of caution we need to keep. I'm not in favor of changing the policy of end fund balance, saying we met the policy. It's not about the meeting the policy. It's about really thinking through the health, financial health of, and the stability, because some of the smaller districts almost reach the point of insolvency. And it also affects our bond rating. Soon we'll be in a position to having to go and, have to kind of go into that process. So it really has multiple reasons why we need to be maintaining at the higher end, in my opinion. It's better to be fiscally cautious, and especially in unsettling times like this, rather than feeling an urge to spend whatever little we have. I'm not comfortable with this 7 point something. That to me looks a little scary. I mean, why a little scary? I'm scared, because that is very uncertain, very low end. I mean, we may be able to kind of balance the budget this time and move ahead, but that's like kicking the can down the lane. And if there is some kind of shortage or federal money or anything else, one of the grant dries up, we will be in a big trouble. And it was very painful to see how we had to let go of our staff, close to 400. So we really have to be cautious. And as budget committee, I would ask our fellow members to please keep that in mind, because school has to continue even beyond this biennium. So thank you.
Okay, so do we have a proposed change to the budget?
I would like to receive the plan to get our math scores and reading scores up. And then I would like the week to review that, and then if I see anything there, I would like to, of course, have the ability to come back if I recommend any changes and be able to do that at the next meeting on May 19th.
Okay. I think it's just cutting it close, because ideally we would be in the process of approval on May 19th. But
Have many more meetings.
I guess statutorily, this is a really good democratic process, and I don't want to cut it short. And I know that we got budget timelines, but I don't want to negate the importance of what this body does. I'm quick, I promise.
We do have a few meetings, Chair, I thought. Didn't we have a few? When is the last meeting scheduled?
so we have Monday, May 19th, and that would be ideally when we pass the budget. But if needed, we also have like the 2 following days scheduled. But that's still kind of like a real quick turnaround for us to be able to really say what modifications we want to make in that process, in that like less than 48 hours at most.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Kelly.
I just want to be sure I'm understanding what the last 5 or 10 minutes proposed. If we are asking to move the ending fund balance up from 7 point something percent, presumably to 10%, each percent is about $11 million in the budget. Is that correct? I'm taking 1.1 and dividing it by 100. 1.1 billion dividing by 100.
As the ratios change, it's not straight math, but
Is that
it might be.
broadly, is that acceptable? So, well, I mean, is it
So back of the napkin, ballpark math, how much money do we need to go from 7% to 10% of
Right.
our ending fund balance?
Right. How much would have to be cut from the budget to get there?
Well, as Sarah thinks that through and does that math, it's not a napkin, but it's a already heavily written on piece of paper.
I mean, we got napkins back here, I'm pretty sure.
I'll say, to give you a frame of reference for this, yes, the additional to go, actually, all the way back to the beginning with committee member Guthridge, the additional FTEs do have an impact. They do, and we need to add them with great care. The bulk of our expense is not the new FTEs, it's the pace of our personnel increases for our current staff. So to give you a frame of reference for that, we are anticipating about $80 million in additional state funding over the biennium. 40 of it is going to PERS, and 77 million is going to go to existing staff's STEP, COLA, and benefits. That's where all the money is. And as Sarah does this math, I only add that context because to make an adjustment at the scale that you're describing now far exceeds anything that we talked about tonight. The only way to do it is to, once again, trigger a reduction in force at a scale and at a time that our system cannot possibly sustain it. That doesn't mean that the instinct is wrong. The protective instinct is 100% right, which is why the original budget message was grateful for this day, but very concerned about 27.
That's, I think, what I wanted to get at. So we're talking about $30 to $40 million to get there, right?
Probably 18.
Okay, $18 million.
It's big.
When in the previous discussion all night, we were talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars and got up to $1,050,000 for 7 positions. I mean, I share everybody's concern, absolutely, but is it realistic? It doesn't seem like it is.
Okay, so I'm gonna make this final call on do we have proposed changes to the budget? Because otherwise, we're going to proceed with the budget that we have for Monday. No, I'm just giving a few moments to wait and make sure if anyone at the last minute wants to raise their hand or anything.
So I didn't quite understand. Catherine, you had a question, right?
You need to use your microphone, please.
Sorry, Catherine's question was to get some plan, so you will be able to ask a question.
Yeah, I put Catherine in a rock and a hard place because she wants to know what our plan is for increasing our reading scores. And if it's less than satisfactory, the idea would be to be able to then create some kind of infusion to make sure that we're working on that.
So, I mean, and you can't fault us for wanting to increase math and reading scores.
Oh, absolutely not.
So, I do want to see kind of what the plan is. And of course, I'm gonna ask how it affects the budget. But I mean, you told me, you just said, plan, budget. So we should have that roadmap about here's what our plan is and here's how we're funding it. I would like to get back to experts that I know in dyslexia and make sure that the letters program meets dyslexia needs. And that is, of course, really important to me. And hopefully everybody that we're getting to our kids with dyslexia. And yeah, I think maybe it's great and maybe I don't have any concerns. I just want to push back a little bit that our state agencies do amazing work on the ground and they are very lean and they do have huge impacts in our communities. And so it's not that, and they get paid quite a bit less. And so I don't know if that's school district, but I just want to push back on that a little bit, that state agencies do amazing work and they get paid and their back office is slimmer. And so again, maybe that's just, school districts are this way, but it is still heavy to me. It is still heavy.
So I just want to ask a follow-up question since I asked you that. During the school board,
Do we have a proposed change to the budget, please?
Yeah.
No?
Okay.
Okay, then I would like for us to be able to adjourn this meeting. It is 8:42. Our next meeting will take place on Monday, May 19th, 2025 at 6 PM. Thank you.